Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ben Aston, and this is the Digital Project Manager podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Clarizen, the leader in enterprise project and portfolio management software. Visit clarizen.com to learn more. We spend a lot of time talking about project initiation, about kicking off projects and how we can make them sing right from the start. But finishing projects can actually be just as much of a challenge. Because at the start of a project, everyone's interested in it, everyone's excited about it, everyone's buzzed. But by the end, actually, everyone kind of tends to be a bit bored of it and isn't really that bothered about it anymore. And if we're not careful, we can get sloppy and lazy. We can stop caring, our team stops caring, and then the client just keeps on asking for more and more. So if we don't end our projects right, we can end up missing things. We can end up going over budget, pissing off our team, pissing off the client, and not learning from the project at all. So we can lose a lot of value just because we take our foot off the gas right at the end. Today, I'm talking to Patrice, and we're going to talk about how we can end projects better. We're going to talk through a checklist of what to do and what not to do that will enable you to end your projects well with some momentum and set yourself up for success on your next project too. So, hi, Patrice.
Hello.
So it's been all of a couple of weeks since we last spoke, but is there anything, tell us about, in fact, I know what's exciting that's recently happened to you. You've just been on your road trip adventure. Would you recommend road trips?
I would recommend road trips to people who enjoy driving and like looking at the same thing for a while if you're going to pass through some of the bigger states. But yeah, we drove from where I live outside of Philadelphia to Colorado Springs. We drove through Pennsylvania, through Ohio, Indiana. We shot up to Chicago real quick for dinner, went to Iowa, ate lunch in Nebraska, drove all the way across South Dakota, stayed a night in Wyoming, and went down into Colorado and flew back because after that much driving, nobody ever wants to see a car again. I don't really think I've left the house much since we got back last Friday.
Good stuff. So tell us, though, in all that time, were there any funny incidents that happened? What was the funniest thing that happened along the way? Something funny or disastrous must have happened.
Well, it's funny and disastrous. Yes. We drove. So one of the things we really wanted to, the reason why we went up as far north as we did into South Dakota was to see Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse. They're very close to each other. Wonderful monuments, things people aspire to see on a bucket list when you're, when you grow up in the US. And the only day that we had to do that, it was a complete and total fog whiteout. You could see nothing, literally nothing. Like, it wasn't even like, oh, you could see like the shape of it, but you can't really make everything out. You literally couldn't see any of it. So we drove to them anyway, on the off chance that maybe the fog would lift. Did not. So it remains on the bucket list. And I don't know if we're ever going to do that again. So it might not be in the cards for me.
That is the worst, isn't it? When you make a special plan and it's a disaster. That's disappointing. So
they have nice gift shops though.
Oh,
so
bonus.
Yeah.
So cool. So tell us. So now you're back from your epic road trip. What are your kind of projects you're working on at the moment? What's carrying you through the summer?
Well, I've got a little bit of a light load through the summer. Actually, I just finished something that was long term. A 2-year plus contract, and I'm a freelancer, so that's a really long time. And I've got a little bit of a lighter load for the summer, which is fantastic because it was a rough few months there, closing stuff up. So I've got a couple of things that I'm going to keep working on for some maintenance stuff for some of my nonprofit clients. And then I'm going to see where, everything takes me. I got a couple irons in the fire and we'll see what comes up, but I'd be totally fine if I, were just as I am now for the rest of the summer. So we'll see.
So if you want a kick-ass remote PM for September, Patrice is open for offers. But you have got something coming up in September. So I know you're speaking at the Digital PM Summit. Now I've never been to it, but for those who haven't been to the Digital PM Summit, tell us what it's about.
So it's basically getting to see all the people that you would love to meet in real life if you could, because they know all of your struggles, all of your pain. It's like reading any of the articles that you read on your site, Ben, because you can really relate to literally everything that's happening in the conference you can relate to. There's lots of conferences where you basically go and you're like, okay, these 4 things apply to what I do. You know, if it's a technology conference or a leadership conference, but it doesn't always directly apply to you, you know, part and parcel. But this does. It's nice to be able to meet people. I'm interested in meeting a lot of the folks that I've met through Slack, your Slack channel. Because some of those folks will be going. I'm really looking forward to seeing them in person. So it should be a good time. I'm doing a very short talk on project retrospectives. And it's just, you know, sort of a trial run to see if I can speak in front of people without having like full body hives. So we'll see how it goes.
Will you be wearing your customary pajamas?
I probably will be. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. I might be wearing a turtleneck just to like cover, because I really do. I break out into hives when I get in like stressful situations. I'm really good at handling it in front of clients, but this will be a whole nother level. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, in person, live. It's it doesn't get scarier than that. Cool. So if you are thinking about going to the Digital PM Summit and you haven't booked yet, well, Patrice has got an offer for you. Have you not, Patrice?
I sure do. If you use my first name, Patrice, Patrice, at checkout, you get $100 off, and it's in Memphis. So you know that $100 is going to buy you a lot of fantastic barbecue.
Yeah. So, and it's in the beginning of September, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it September the 6th or something?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
yep.
Beginning of September. So if you like Patrice and you want to meet her in the flesh and listen to her lightning talk on project retrospectives, as long as a whole load of other interesting talks, then head to the Digital PM Summit site, which I think is bureauofdigital.com, and I love the way that you say Patrice for your $100 off, and and you will get to see Patrice as well as a few other DPM favorites who are heading over there. I think we've got some other people talking there as well who make appearances on the DPM site. There's also Suze Hayworth is giving a talk. Who else have we got who's giving a talk? I'm just browsing through here. Kelly Suter as well. So there's some good peeps.
Yes.
Good peeps going. Yes. So check it out. Cool. Well, let's talk about the article that you wrote for us, which wasn't about project retrospectives, but it was about, as I alluded to in the intro, about project closure, about how we can close projects better. And I think projects can totally unravel in that last stretch, as I said at the beginning, as we just take our foot off the gas because we think we're there, we think we've done it, but somehow that final 2% of the project can just seem to last for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it can be really hard to actually get a project actually done. So let's talk about how we can do this better, how we can stop our projects slipping away from us at the last minute, creating this world of pain for ourselves, for our team, for our clients. How do we do that? So let's talk about the realities though of ending projects. When we get to the end of the project, putting in effort is the last thing that we want to do. We've kind of got other projects on the horizon. So what's your how do you stay engaged in a project when it's right at the finish line, when, to be honest, you've kind of lost interest in it and everyone else has lost interest in it? What's your kind of motivation? Where do you draw that motivation from?
I basically, for myself and everyone who's on the team, I'll say, look, this is literally the last thing we have to do. And then we can totally never talk about this again. Or we can talk about how great this was the next time, depending on how the project went. But it's just reminding everyone that there's just a small amount of work to be done at the end. A lot of it is, for the project manager to do. So you really only have to motivate yourself for a lot of it. And you can get yourself into a good spot knowing that the line item on your timesheet for this project can finally be removed.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's a motivation in itself, isn't it? I mean,
Yes,
it's
take
it's
it
one
all.
less thing to have to add to your timesheets. But you kind of covered this off at the end, and let's kind of start with it. Like the often at the end of the project, one of the reasons that we kind of become disengaged from it is because it is almost over. We've kind of run out of budget for the project, and so we don't really want to put much time on it. Um, so what do you do? What's your way of I mean, we need to do it properly, but if we don't have the budget to do it, what's kind of your approach for trying to find a way to end it properly when there's no budget or time allocated for it?
Well, when you look at all the different things that you need to do to close a project and you don't have a lot of time or budget, to be doing everything on there, you just have to decide for each project what's the most important thing. If it was a really big, complicated project with a client that changed their mind a lot, one of the things you're going to want to make sure that you do is go through plans and timelines for anything you might have missed. Look at your notes, the first couple of things that I mentioned in the checklist, because that's really where you're going to get strung up later on. If your client goes back and says, didn't we say we were
Yeah,
going to do this? And whatever happened to that?
yeah,
You want to be prepared, even if there's no more budget and you wouldn't be able to do it, even if you found it, you want to find it before they do and raise the flag. So if there's no more budget for it, you at least need to talk to someone to say like, well, how are we going to handle this one? So I would say that if you've got limited time, limited budget, figure out the most important things, to do, and just do those. But it's a good practice to try to do all of the things on the list.
yeah. So yeah, so let's talk about. I mean, that thing that you in your checklist, there's 9 items on it, and we're not going to go through every one of them because you could just read the article. But you talk about going over the plan and the timeline, and then it kind of, I guess, in concert with that, the second item is scanning your notes and messages to track down these out of scope or these parking lot items, so that you get this. Uh, I guess, an insight into what we said we'd be doing versus what we've actually delivered. And I guess trying to identify, where there's some risk in the client being able to turn around and say, hey, we said we'd have a contact form on this page and it's not there. So kind of trying to get ahead of that. But so what's your kind of how do you kind of typically log all those things that you found, or how do you keep track of those things and then manage that process of explaining to the client, well, uh, the project's done, so you're not going to get them now.
Yeah, that's always the tough thing. If during the project, and I think that you've got a lot of great information on your site about how to make sure that you're capturing everything at the beginning of a project and during a project. And so, if you're employing some of those things, like making sure that you're taking good notes and maybe even have a separate list where you're keeping some things that you're not going to be doing that are out of scope that once were in scope. So you're not removing them from your mind altogether, even though everybody wants to do that, but you're putting them off to the side and where they are, a parking lot, if you will, or however you keep track of things that you've decided not to do. And not just stuff that you've decided not to do, things you've decided to do that might have, like you said, just get lost along the way. So, you
Right.
find those
Yeah.
things. Step one is to make sure that they're really not there and there isn't something that you can say, well, we didn't do that because we did this and there's a reason why we didn't do it. Sort of follow
Yeah.
each one up as best as you can. Depending on what your rapport is with the client, you may want to say, I found these things. We're definitely, done the project and we've launched already. Did you want to do a phase 2 to work these back in? There are clients out there that'll say like, we
Yeah.
totally get it. We did everything we said, we launched, we said we were fine. There's these extra things and we should do a phase 2. Some will say, well, when do you plan to, do those for us and not charge us? So, it's just a matter of the
Yeah.
biggest thing you need to take away is find them, because the worst thing is for them to find them for you, and then you're sort of already on the hot seat. So find them first, then you can figure out what your tactic is going to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's solid advice. Yeah, going through and getting ahead of the client, because when they kind of come back to you a week later when you ramp down the team, and and when they say, hey, you said you were going to do this, and I think one of the things that I think is a real classic example of this is tracking. And after something goes live, it's usually not until something goes live and the client's beginning to see the results come through in Google Analytics, whatever that they're using. And it might be that we haven't, implemented the funnel tracking properly, or the tagged things like event tracking, or whatever it might be. But that's kind of one of those things that's a classic example of the client's not going to realize until after the fact, that it's not being done properly. So we need to get ahead of all those things. And I think this is why status reports and keeping a log throughout the project of all the kind of key decisions that were made can really help in providing the ammunition you need to have that conversation with the client. Say, yeah, well, we didn't do the event tracking because, do you remember, we did this other thing instead that you said was actually more important. So that status report and having a log of the decisions you made can be a useful tool when you do that.
Absolutely.
Um, are there any other kind of things? I mean, I just mentioned tracking, but what other things do you find get missed off at the end of a project in those kind of closing phases when when we tend to get a bit lazy?
Yeah, it's basically anything where like you've gotten to the end of a project and you're like, all right, we have to figure out what the MVP is, the minimum viable product, and we're only going to focus on that, and we'll worry about the other stuff later. So this is the other stuff later. Things like I know that I got caught on a project once not having any alt tags on images. It was such a little thing. But at the time, the client didn't have them ready, and we just needed to move on. And I did write it down, but I didn't notice it by the time we got to the end of the project. And the client actually called it out and said that they had failed an accessibility audit because they didn't have the alt tag. So it's stuff like that. It's stuff where you were like, it's alt tags. Like, we don't need to worry about it. Like, you do need to worry about it at some point. And maybe you don't need to worry about it later, but you at least need to know that it's there. So you might decide even later on that it's not a big deal, but you just at least need to know about it so you can make a better decision about it.
Yeah, I think, some of the things I just thought of was, content is a big one. So alt tags, but also like when developers have a tendency sometimes to use like placeholder images in the layouts, and I think numerous times I have gone live with sites where someone had just forgotten about a page that everyone had got used to the cat picture that was on that page, and then you go live and like, hold on a second, that's not the image it's supposed to be. Be wary of placeholder images and dummy content as well. Like Lorem Ipsum looks like ordinary text if you're not
That's
reading
true.
properly. So content, images, tracking, alt tags, those kind of things. These are anything kind of that in the QA process. I think it's really important that we have a proper plan for our QA so that those kind of things don't get missed out.
Right. But it could be things more like, we had thought we were going to use a widget for this thing. So it's not necessarily something that QA would pick up on, like alt tags or the wrong images, but literal things that you had talked about at one point where you were like, all right, well, we'll take care of that later, or we can't focus on that now. And then you just never focus on it. Could be a feature that your QA person would never even know was a thing. So they're not going to pick up on it. So it's just, you have to keep your eyes open in all directions for things.
Yeah. So let's assume though that we've wrapped that up then, and we're trying to actually close the project down. And I think this can also be one of the tricky things as well, right? I mean, there's one side of the coin, which is, there's still things that kind of need to be done. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is, we need to stop this thing because we're just burning we're just burning money on the project. And while that pot is still open in timesheets, people will still keep logging their time on it because they can. So what do you do to ramp down the team and kind of shut things off and close it down and try and draw a line in the sand? What are the kind of things that you do to make that happen?
Well, if you write a wrap-up note to your team, that's a really great place to say, and by the way, since this is over, there's no more billing. And if you have a billing system like Harvest or something that would allow you to not give them the opportunity to bill, that certainly will remind them as well. But you want to do a wrap-up note to your team anyway, just to say like, hey, we did a great job. If you have any client feedback, even if it's just like the client thought the launch went smoothly or the client was really pleased with the outcome, anything you can pass along to the team that, from the client that says that they did a good job. But just to kind of acknowledge everyone, maybe talk about one or two things were hard, and just, keep, but wrap it up, say like, it's been a pleasure working with everyone, and, shout out to this person for this thing, and no more billing. And then, you send that out and you're kind of done for the internal, for the team side, until you do your retrospective, if you're able to do a retrospective.
Yeah. So, let's talk about retrospectives, as this is your topic, your lightning talk topic. So don't give it all away. But one of the things you talk about is anonymous surveys. And we've talked about a lot recently, actually, about project retrospectives, and I don't think anyone else has actually mentioned anonymous surveys. So I'm interested in how you make that work. What do you ask people? How do you, if it's anonymous, how do you get people to answer it, or do you know if they've answered it or not? Tell us about making anonymous surveys work.
Yeah, they've worked really well for me because people feel more inclined to say something that they might not say in person, or even if it can be directly attributed to them, they'll be a little bit more candid, which is what you want. You want to know all the good and the bad. You need to know how it went so that you can do something better later on. You won't be able to do that if you don't have real honest feedback, not just, lip service that you might get if you've put someone on the spot in a meeting. So I use anonymous surveys to just, I ask 3 questions: what went well, what didn't go well, and what should we do again? If I feel like I've got a really nicely engaged group, I might, ask a few more questions. But, if I know that they're already waning, I kind of just, with the surveys, what I'll do is, when I ask questions like what went well, if you just ask an open-ended question, a lot of times people won't be inclined to do it. So what I do is I try to think of things that I think went well, or I would think they think went well, and I'll add them in as a multiple choice, and then there'll be a write-in answer. So they can either choose something that I've already, kind of put together that I know might be an issue or I know went well, and at least I'm getting some feedback and not nothing at all. But that might spur them to say like, yeah, but what about this other great thing that we did? And that'll, motivate them to write in an answer. So take all that information and I synthesize it. And when I give the retrospective, people generally can tell from what area, feedback will have come.
The design was awful.
Yeah. And I always soften the blow. Like I tell people, you can write whatever you want. I will not take what you said word for word and put it in the retrospective. I just need to know, and people have been really good with being honest and, even their own part in why something didn't work. So the anonymous surveys have worked out really well for me.
Yeah, I really like the idea of pre-populating the responses because people tend to have major blanks, brain freeze, particularly actually when you're kind of sat around trying to do a retrospective on a project. And, I find that you can have everyone sitting there and you go, you ask that question. So guys, what do you think went well? And it's just stunned silence. I guess it was all right. Yeah.
Right.
I guess the design looks all right. Okay, guys, here are 3 things that I've thought of, and they're like, yeah, that's right. And but yeah, giving them a prompt or an idea of, hey, how about these I think that's really cool, and I like anonymous as well. People are much more likely to tell you what they really think, and that is how we're going to improve, isn't it? If people are honest rather than worried about upsetting the person who sat next to them when they still have to,
Yeah.
they probably still have to work with them on the next project. So I think that's a really cool idea. Is there anything about anonymous surveys that in your experience, has not gone well ever? Like, has anyone somehow uncovered? I mean, you said you put a spin on the responses that you get, but
I mean, the only thing that really doesn't go well is if people decide not to respond, and if it's truly an anonymous survey, you don't know who they are that didn't respond, so you can't follow up with specific people, and you have to bug everybody. So that can be a little bit of a bummer. Sometimes I'll do like a quasi-anonymous, so I'll know who the user was because their email address will be, something,
right.
But I would never, they trust me not to, out them or whatever. So they know that if I say that I'm not going to reveal who said what, that I'm not going to actually do that. I have their trust. So, so if you want to do it that way, so you can, follow up with people, but generally, just in general, I'll only follow up once, because if you have got to chase people down for information for a retrospective, it's not going to be super useful information, because they're just going to want to, you don't want someone to be like, ugh, whatever here. You want real information. So, but that tends to be the hardest part of an anonymous survey, is just, not being able to follow up specifically with people to do it.
Yeah. And so one of the other things in the checklist is, we're having a retrospective with the team, but then also asking the client for feedback too. So tell us how, do you normally do that informally, or do you try a questionnaire or a survey with them as well? How do you kind of draw that information from the client, particularly if the project didn't go so well?
Well, yeah, I'll generally say like, hey, it would help us out a lot if you could tell us just a little bit about this, and this, what you thought went well. Is there any way that, anything that we should take from this to improve? There are some clients and some projects that have gone so poorly that you don't even want to open that door. But there are some really great, there's some really great projects that, and great partners out there. We always tend to remember the terrible ones, but there's plenty of great ones out there too. So if you've got a good rapport with your client, you can say, hey, it would really help me out if you did this, this, and this. And they tend to want to respond in writing so they can think it through rather than talk it through. Yeah. But whatever they're most comfortable with, if they're able to give you even just a little bit of information, it's good information to have, because you could decide what went well and what didn't well all you want, and it could be great internally, but if that didn't translate into something that the client thought was good, then it doesn't, like, how valuable is it? So getting even just a little bit of client feedback is definitely helpful to make sure that you know what to do next time.
Yeah, and I think it can sometimes be helpful as well. It can sometimes be awkward if we are just asking clients for feedback at the end of the project and the end of the process, particularly if it's bad.
Totally.
We can also, if it's part of our ongoing discussion with them, like once a month, we kind of have a chat with them and say, hey, what's going well, what's not going so well, how can we make this better for you? And having that as part of an ongoing discussion, you sometimes get less of a reactionary response if something has just gone live that was terrible, and then you're like, yeah, we all know it went badly, but help us here.
Yeah, I also, if the client ever, like, during the project sends an email where they say something like, that was great or something, I keep those in this special folder. I do, and anything that, right. And I look at them whenever I feel bad, and that's not a lie. I actually do look at those whenever I feel bad. But I also keep everything that's super critical along the way. So even if it's a bad project, and I don't want to even ask the client about something at the end, I can go back to those emails and be able to pull out, obviously, what didn't go well if it's a bad email, or what did go well. So if you can't ask your client that, you can usually find something. If you take good notes or keep good records, you can find out along the way what they thought worked and what didn't work.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to end there because we're out of time. But if you want to read through the rest of the items on the checklist, head to thedigitalprojectmanager.com and you'll find Patrice's article on project closure there. So Patrice, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great having you with us today.
Thank you.
And as one of our DPM experts, Patrice will be making an appearance not only at the Digital PM Summit, but also on our upcoming course that starts in September as well. It's called Mastering Digital Project Management. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, but you know you need some PM training, check it out. It's a 7-week crash course that includes video lessons, it includes weekly assignments, group discussions, and also the option of coaching sessions too. So head to the dpmschool.com and get yourself signed up before the course fills up. And if you'd like to contribute to the conversation on closing projects better, comment on the post and head to the digitalprojectmanager.com to join our Slack team. Head to the resources section there and you'll find all kinds of interesting conversations going on there too. But until next time, thanks for listening.